My name is Dexter Holbrook, and I'm about to tell you how a worn leather briefcase changed everything I thought I knew about my father. The mahogany-paneled office of Harlan and Associates still smelled like his cigars, even though Raymond Holbrook had been dead for 2 weeks. I stood in the corner, watching my brother Sterling celebrate what he'd always known was coming. $50 million, Sterling said, holding the estate documents like they were holy scripture. The entire Holbrook hospitality empire. 17 hotels, the Lake Forest mansion, the car collection. He really did leave me everything. He popped open a bottle of champagne he'd brought with him. The cork hit the ceiling, leaving a small mark on the white paint. Uncle Harlan winced but said nothing. Sterling had always been like this, celebrating before the moment was even over, claiming victory before the game was done. At 42, he looked exactly like our father had at that age. Sharp jaw, steel gray eyes, the kind of presence that made people stand up straighter when he walked into a room. "That's not entirely accurate," Uncle Harlan said, adjusting his reading glasses. He was 70 now, our father's younger brother, the family lawyer who'd handled Holbrook business for 4 decades. "There's something for Dexter as well." Sterling laughed, as he poured champagne into a coffee mug he'd grabbed from Harlan's desk. "Oh, right, I forgot. What did Dad leave you, Dex? Please tell me it's at least enough to buy a better car than that Honda you drive." I didn't answer. I was 38 years old, a high school chemistry teacher at Lincoln High, and I'd made peace with being the family disappointment years ago. While Sterling had joined Dad in the hotel business straight out of Northwestern, I'd chosen chalk dust and lesson plans. While he wore $3,000 suits to board meetings, I wore department store khakis to parent-teacher conferences. We both knew how this would go. Uncle Harlan reached under his desk and pulled out something that made my stomach drop. It was a briefcase, brown leather so worn it looked like it had been dragged behind a truck. One of the brass corners was completely tarnished green. The leather handle was cracked down the middle and wrapped with duct tape, and one of the 2 locks hung at an odd angle like it had been forced open and never properly fixed. "Raymond wanted you to have this," Harlan said, pushing it across the desk toward me. The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Sterling erupted. "Are you serious right now? That's it? That's his inheritance?" He was laughing so hard he had to set down his champagne. "Oh my God, Dex, do you know what that is? That's Dad's first briefcase, from when he was selling insurance policies door to door in the 70s, before he bought the first motel. He used to keep it in the library like some kind of trophy." I picked up the briefcase. It weighed almost nothing, like it was empty. The leather felt rough under my fingers, dried out and neglected. There was a dark stain on one side that could have been coffee or something worse. When I tried the latches, they wouldn't budge. Locked or jammed, I couldn't tell. He kept saying you needed to learn the value of hard work, Sterling continued, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. "Guess he figured you should start where he did, 40 years too late. Hey, maybe there's a list of his old insurance clients in there. You could cold call them, see if they need coverage." "Sterling, that's enough," Uncle Harlan said, but there was no real force behind it. "Come on, Uncle Harlan, even you have to admit this is classic Dad. Dexter spends his whole life rejecting the family business to go play with test tubes and grade papers, and Dad leaves him a reminder of what real work looks like. It's poetic, really." My mother was watching all of this through a laptop screen, video calling from her condo in Boca Raton. She'd remarried 3 years after she and Dad divorced, to a man named Philip who apparently made his money in real estate. Her face showed no emotion as she watched her sons divide their father's legacy. She'd always been good at that, keeping her thoughts locked away where no one could reach them. "Anything you want to add, Vivian?" Harlan asked her. "Raymond always had his reasons," she said quietly. Then the screen went black. She'd disconnected without even saying goodbye. Sterling stood up, straightening his Italian suit jacket. "Well, little brother, If you need a job, I'm sure I can find something for you at one of the hotels. Maybe bell service. You're good with helping people, right? That's what teachers do. He clapped me on the shoulder as he headed for the door, already pulling out his phone to call someone, probably his wife Miranda, to share the good news. The champagne bottle sat on Harlan's desk, still 3/4 full, abandoned now that the celebration was over. I stood there, holding that beat-up briefcase, and something inside me shifted. Because Uncle Harlan was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not pity, not sympathy, something else entirely. Something that looked like anticipation. The reading of Raymond Holbrook's will should have been straightforward. Dad had built his hotel empire from scratch, starting with one roadside motel in 1975 and expanding to 17 luxury properties across the Midwest. The Holbrook name was on buildings from Chicago to Kansas City, each one a monument to his belief that hospitality was about more than just beds and breakfast. It was about creating experiences, he used to say, about making people feel like they belonged somewhere special, even if just for one night. Sterling had worked beside him for 20 years as vice president of operations. He knew every property by heart, could recite occupancy rates and revenue projections in his sleep. He'd married Miranda from the Ashworth Hotel family, creating what Dad called a dynasty of hospitality. Their twin daughters, Madison and Mackenzie, were already talking about hotel management programs at Cornell. The succession plan had been written in stone long before Dad's heart attack in the library of the Lake Forest house. I chose a different path. Teaching chemistry at Lincoln High paid $48,000 a year, barely enough to cover rent and student loans, but there was something about watching a kid finally understand molecular bonds or seeing their face light up when an experiment worked perfectly. Dad never understood it. "You're wasting your potential, Dexter," he'd said at every holiday dinner, birthday celebration, and family gathering for the past 15 years. "Your brother understands legacy. You understand periodic tables. One builds empires, the other builds nothing." The last time I saw him alive was at his 71st birthday party, 3 months ago. Sterling had rented out the ballroom at the flagship Holbrook property, invited 200 guests, hired a 12-piece band. I'd shown up late, still wearing my teaching clothes because I'd been helping a student after school with their science fair project. Dad had looked at me across that glittering room, surrounded by senators and business moguls, and just shook his head. Mr. Holbrook was very specific about his final wishes, Uncle Harlan had said when he called about the will reading. Both sons need to be present. Now, sitting in Harlan's law office, I understood why. The room hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same heavy oak desk that had belonged to Harlan's father, same leather chairs that creaked when you shifted your weight, same portrait of our grandfather, Samuel Holbrook, who'd started the family's first business selling farm equipment in the 1920s. Sterling had taken Dad's usual chair without asking, spreading himself out like he already owned the place. "Before we begin," Harlan said, pulling out a thick folder, "I need to verify that everyone is present. Sterling Raymond Holbrook?" "Present and ready to get this done," Sterling said, checking his Rolex. "I have a meeting with the board at 3. "Already scheduling board meetings?" I asked. "Someone has to keep the empire running. The hotels don't manage themselves just because Dad died." "Dexter Allen Holbrook?" Harlan continued. "Here," I said, and Vivian Holbrook, attending virtually from Florida. My mother's face appeared on the laptop screen. She was 65 now, but looked younger, her hair still blonde, her face carefully composed. Philip lurked in the background, a shadow in a golf shirt. She'd met him at a charity event in Miami, married him 6 months later. Dad didn't attend the wedding, said he had a conference in Tokyo that couldn't be rescheduled. "The estate of Raymond James Holbrook," Harlan began, his voice taking on the formal tone of legal proceedings. "Executed this day, with all provisions to be carried out according to his express wishes." He looked up at us over his reading glasses. Your father updated this will 6 weeks before his death. He was very particular about the language. 6 weeks ago? Sterling frowned. He didn't mention anything about changes. He wasn't required to, Harlan replied, then continued reading. To my eldest son, Sterling Raymond Holbrook, I leave the entirety of Holbrook Hospitality Holdings, including all 17 properties, associated real estate, the estate in Lake Forest, my collection of vintage automobiles, and all associated assets, stocks, bonds, and business interests, valued at approximately $50 million. Sterling didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. He leaned back in the chair, fingers laced behind his head. He always said I was born for this business, said it was in my blood. To my younger son, Dexter Allen Holbrook, Harlan continued, reaching under his desk, I leave this. He placed the battered brown briefcase on the table. The leather was cracked like a dry riverbed, the brass corners green with oxidation, one latch hanging at an angle that suggested violence. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the traffic noise from the street below seemed to pause. My mother's face on the screen remained perfectly still, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Recognition? It was gone before I could be sure. That evening, I sat alone in my one-bedroom apartment, staring at the briefcase on my kitchen table. The fluorescent light above flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across the worn leather. Sterling had already texted me 17 times, each message more gloating than the last. Photos from Dad's mansion where he was taking inventory, a selfie with the Bentley in the 6-car garage, a video tour of the wine cellar with his commentary about hosting the next board meeting there. Don't worry, little brother, his latest message read. I'll hire you as a bellhop if teaching doesn't work out. Starting salary and everything. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the cheap stuff from the grocery store, not the $100 bottles Dad used to keep in his study. The briefcase sat there like an accusation. Was this really Dad's final message to me? That I was worth exactly one piece of garbage from his past? I tried the latches again. Nothing. The locks were completely seized, decades of dust and corrosion holding them shut. I could break it open, take a hammer to the thing, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Uncle Harlan had looked at me when he handed it over, that strange expression of anticipation. Or maybe it was my mother's face on that screen, the way she disconnected so quickly, like she couldn't bear to watch what came next. At midnight, I called Jasmine Walker, my colleague who taught the shop class at Lincoln High. We'd become friends over lunch duty and shared complaints about budget cuts. Dex, it's midnight. Everything okay? I need a favor. Can you help me open something without destroying it? Now you've got me curious. Bring it by tomorrow. I'll be in the shop early, setting up for the freshman woodworking unit. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my computer, searching for anything about Dad's early career. The official Holbrook Hospitality website told the sanitized version. Raymond Holbrook, entrepreneur and visionary, started with a single motel in Springfield and built an empire through hard work and determination. Nothing about insurance sales. Nothing about a briefcase. But I found an old newspaper interview from 1976, archived in the Springfield Gazette digital collection. There was Dad, young and hungry-looking, standing in front of his first motel. In his hand was a briefcase. This briefcase. The photo caption read, Raymond Holbrook credits his success to never forgetting where he came from. The next morning, I arrived at school at 6:30. Jasmine was already in the shop, safety goggles on, organizing drill bits. That looks like it's been through a war, she said when I set the briefcase on her workbench. Something like that, the locks won't budge. She examined them closely, running her fingers over the mechanism. These are quality, German-made from the 60s, Abus brand. Your dad didn't cheap out even on his first briefcase. She pulled out a set of picks and lubricant. The real question is why they're jammed. This kind of damage doesn't happen from age. This looks like heat damage, like they were exposed to extreme temperature. Can you open them? Give me time. If we force them, we might damage whatever's inside. For an hour, she worked with the patience of a surgeon. Students started arriving for first period, but she waved them off, told them to read Chapter 6. I paced behind her, checking my phone. Sterling had sent another message, this time a photo of him sitting in Dad's office chair at the flagship hotel. "Feels right," the caption said. "Got it," Jasmine announced as the first lock clicked open. The sound was louder than it should have been in the cluttered shop. The second lock fought harder, grinding against her picks. Whatever happened to these locks, it fused some of the internal mechanisms. Someone really didn't want this opened, or maybe they didn't want it opened easily. When the second lock finally released, my hands were shaking. Jasmine stepped back, giving me space. "You want privacy?" "No, stay. I might need a witness." I opened the briefcase slowly. The leather hinges creaked like they were announcing something important. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, my name written across it in Dad's handwriting. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, were stacks of documents. The letter was brief, just 3 lines that made no sense. "Dexter, go to First National Bank, Downtown Branch. Account 0037. Tell them you're picking up for Raymond. They'll know." "Dad?" "That's cryptic," Jasmine said, reading over my shoulder. Dad was never cryptic. He was the most straightforward person I knew. He said what he meant, usually whether you wanted to hear it or not. Maybe that's what he wanted everyone to think. The straightforward hotel mogul with nothing to hide. I picked up the plastic-wrapped documents. Through the cloudy covering, I could see they were old, some typed on a typewriter, others handwritten. There were photographs, too, black and white, faces I didn't recognize. "You going to the bank?" Jasmine asked. "I have to. This is the only thing he left me. Even if it's just some kind of final insult, I need to know." I called in sick the next day, something I'd only done twice in 10 years of teaching. My principal, Dr. Rodriguez, sounded concerned. "This isn't like you, Dexter. Is everything all right?" "Family emergency," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. The drive downtown took 40 minutes in morning traffic. First National Bank's original branch stood like a limestone fortress among the glass towers, a relic from the 1920s when banks were built to look like they could survive anything. Marble columns flanked the entrance, and the brass doors were so heavy I had to lean into them with my shoulder. Inside, the lobby stretched 3 stories high, with murals on the ceiling depicting commerce, industry, and agriculture as Greek goddesses. Everything whispered old money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it had always been there. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor as I approached the teller windows. "I'm here about account Swother 37, I told the teller, a young woman whose nameplate read Miranda Chen. "I'm picking up for Raymond Holbrook." Her fingers froze over the keyboard. She looked at me, then at her screen, then back at me. "1 moment, please." She picked up a phone, dialed 3 numbers, and spoke in a whisper I couldn't hear. "Someone will be right with you. Please have a seat." I sat on a leather bench that probably cost more than my car. Other customers came and went, conducting normal banking business while I waited. 5 minutes became 10. I was about to return to the window when a man emerged from a door marked Private. He was in his 60s, wearing a suit that looked hand-tailored, with silver hair combed back from a face that belonged on currency. "Mr. Dexter Holbrook? I'm William Thornley, branch president. We've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" "Your father made arrangements. Please, follow me." We walked past the regular banking floor, through the private door, down a hallway lined with oil paintings of previous bank presidents. Thornley used a keycard to access an elevator I hadn't noticed, brass fixtures and wood paneling making it look original to the building. "Your father opened account Shui 37 in 1974, Thornley explained as we descended. He gave very specific instructions about its access. Only 2 people were authorized, himself and you, but not until after his death. 1974? That's before he started the hotels. Yes, sir. A full year before he purchased his first property. The elevator opened onto a basement level that looked like a movie set. Safety deposit boxes lined the walls, hundreds of them, each with 2 locks. The air was cool and dry, controlled to preserve whatever secrets people stored down here. Thornley led me to a corner, to a box that was larger than the others. "I'll need to see identification," he said apologetically. "Protocol." I handed over my driver's license. He studied it, compared it to something on his tablet, then nodded. "The box requires 2 keys. I have the bank's key. Your key was supposed to be in your possession." "I don't have a key." Thornley smiled slightly. "Your father said you might say that. He said to tell you, check the lining." "The lining of what?" "He said you'd know." "The briefcase." I'd brought it with me, some instinct telling me not to leave it in the car. I set it on the table and ran my fingers along the inner lining. There, in the corner where the leather had separated from the frame, I felt something hard. A careful tear revealed a small brass key, tarnished but intact. "Your father was a careful man," Thornley said, inserting his key. "He understood that some things need to be protected not just from theft, but from discovery." We turned our keys simultaneously. The box opened with a mechanical click that sounded like finality. Thornley pulled out the long metal container and set it on the viewing table. "I'll leave you alone. Take as much time as you need. Press this button when you're finished." He indicated a pearl button on the wall, then left, closing a door I hadn't noticed behind him. I was alone in a basement vault with whatever Raymond Holbrook had hidden for 47 years. My hands trembled as I opened the metal container. Inside were stacks of bearer bonds, gold certificates, and cash and bills so old some of them looked foreign. A quick count made me dizzy. $3 million, maybe more, in untraceable assets. But the money wasn't what stopped my breath. It was the manila folder beneath it, thick with documents and photographs. I opened it carefully, like it might explode. The first thing I saw was my own face staring back at me from a birth certificate, but the name under father wasn't Raymond Holbrook. It was Vincent Corvino. The birth certificate trembled in my hands. Vincent Corvino. A name I'd never heard, attached to my life like a shadow I never knew existed. The next document was a newspaper clipping from the Chicago Tribune, dated March 15, 1985. Federal witness dies in car explosion outside courthouse. The article detailed how Vincent Corvino, a businessman who had agreed to testify against the Torelli crime family's money laundering operation, had been killed when his car exploded in the courthouse parking garage. The explosion had been so powerful it damaged 3 other vehicles. No one else was hurt, which investigators found suspicious, like someone had known exactly when he'd be alone. I kept reading, each sentence rewriting my entire life. Vincent Corvino had been prepared to provide evidence about how the Torelli family had laundered millions through legitimate businesses throughout the Midwest. His death had collapsed the federal case. Without his testimony, 36 suspected mobsters walked free. The next item was a photograph that made me sink into the viewing room chair. It showed my mother, young and radiant, maybe 25 years old, standing between 2 men outside what looked like a hotel construction site. One man was clearly Raymond, younger but unmistakable with his confident posture and sharp jaw. The other man could have been me in a costume drama. Same narrow face, same slight curl to the dark hair, same eyes that my mother always said came from her father but clearly didn't. Vincent Corvino had his arm around my mother's waist. She was leaning into him, smiling in a way I'd never seen her smile at Raymond. More photographs followed. Vincent and Raymond at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, the 2 of them shaking hands over architectural blueprints. A Christmas party where Vincent held a baby that had to be me, based on the date written on the back, December 1986. I would have been 10 months old. Then came the contracts, typed on an IBM Selectric, notarized and witnessed. The letterhead read, Corvino Holbrook Enterprises, Inc. The documents laid out a partnership formed in 1974. Vincent Corvino had provided the initial capital, $2 million in cash, for Raymond Holbrook to purchase and renovate 3 roadside motels. Raymond would manage the operations. Vincent would remain a silent partner. The profits would be split 60-40, with the majority going to Vincent. But there was a clause that made me read it 3 times to be sure I understood. Upon the death of either partner, their shares would transfer to their oldest male heir when that heir reached 40 years of age. If no male heir existed, the shares would go to the surviving partner. Vincent had died when I was 14 months old. According to these papers, on my 40th birthday, I would inherit 30% of everything Raymond had built. Sterling owned 70%, but not 100, not the entire empire he thought he'd inherited. The final document in the folder was a letter from Raymond, handwritten on his personal stationery, dated 3 weeks before his death. Dexter, if you're reading this, then you're standing in a bank vault, learning that your entire life has been a carefully constructed lie designed to keep you alive. Your biological father was Vincent Corvino, my best friend and business partner. We met in 1973 when I was selling insurance, and he was looking for legitimate investments for money that, frankly, I didn't ask about. Vincent wasn't a criminal, but he knew criminals. He'd grown up with them, went to school with their children, couldn't escape the gravitational pull of that life even when he tried. When he met your mother at a New Year's party in 1984, everything changed. She was working as a secretary at my insurance firm. Vincent fell completely, hopelessly in love. They married 6 months later. You were born the following year. For 14 months, Vincent was the happiest I'd ever seen him. Then the FBI came calling. They had him on tape discussing money transfers with Anthony Torelli. They offered him a deal, testimony for immunity and witness protection for his family. Vincent took it to protect you and Vivian. But the Torellis found out. They always found out. The explosion that killed Vincent was meant to be a message. But the FBI couldn't prove who ordered it, and your mother was left with a 14-month-old son whose father's name was a death sentence. That's when she came to me. I had just married Sterling's mother, Patricia. We agreed to raise you as my own, to never let anyone connect you to the Corvino name. Your mother and I created a fiction that we'd had an affair, that you were my biological son from that relationship. Patricia agreed to the lie to protect an innocent child. She died believing you were my blood, and I let her. The Torellis believed Vincent's line had ended. They had no reason to look for a son who supposedly belonged to Raymond Holbrook, legitimate hotel magnate. You were hidden in plain sight, carrying my name like armor. Every harsh word I spoke to you, every criticism about your career choices, every comparison to Sterling, it was all designed to keep you small, unnoticed, invisible. The Torellis might ignore a high school chemistry teacher. They would never ignore a hotel executive worth millions. But Vincent's shares in our partnership remain valid. The lawyers tell me the contract is ironclad. On your 40th birthday, you can claim them. Sterling will fight it, but he'll lose. Vincent was too smart, and I made sure the documentation was perfect. The money in this box is also yours, Vincent's personal funds that I've been protecting. Use it however you wish, but be careful when you claim the shares. The Torelli family has long memories, though most of the old generation is dead or in prison now. Your mother knows everything. She stays away to maintain the fiction. The man she married in Florida, Philip, is former FBI, part of the original task force that tried to protect Vincent. He's her bodyguard, not her husband in any real sense. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. Every time you looked at me with hurt in your eyes, it broke something in me. But broken hearts heal, dead sons don't. You were never my disappointment, Dexter. You were my greatest success because you lived. Raymond, the only father you knew. I sat in that viewing room for 3 hours, rebuilding my entire life story in my mind. Every harsh word, from Raymond, every push toward mediocrity, every comparison to Sterling that had cut like glass, all of it had been protection. He'd played the villain in my story to keep me safe from actual villains who would have killed Vincent Corvino's son without hesitation. I photographed every document with my phone, then carefully returned everything to the safety deposit box except for the letter. That I kept. Thornley was waiting outside when I pressed the pearl button. "Will you be removing the contents today, Mr. Holbrook?" "No, not yet. I need time to think." "Your father said you might say that too. The box is paid for through the next decade. It will be here when you're ready." I drove straight to Uncle Harlan's office. His secretary tried to tell me he was in a meeting, but I walked past her. Harlan was alone, reading a brief, and didn't look surprised when I entered. "You knew," I said, placing Raymond's letter on his desk. "You knew everything." He removed his reading glasses, folded them carefully. I drew up the original partnership contracts in 1974. I was there when Vincent and Raymond shook hands on their first deal. I stood as witness at Vincent and your mother's wedding, though we told everyone later that never happened. And yes, I knew who your real father was. Sterling doesn't know. Sterling sees what he wants to see. The golden child inheriting the kingdom. He won't see you coming until the papers are filed on your 40th birthday. 18 months from now. 18 months. Vincent was smart about the contract terms. The shares can't be contested, can't be sold for 10 years after you claim them. You'll be Sterling's business partner whether he likes it or not. 30% gives you enough power to block any major decisions. You'll have a seat on the board, voting rights, access to all financial records. Every hotel with Sterling's name on it will have yours too, in spirit if not on the letterhead. I thought about Sterling's smug face, his champagne celebration, his offers to hire me as a bellhop. He's going to lose his mind. Probably, but legally there's nothing he can do. I made sure of that. Your father, Raymond, insisted we check and double-check every detail. The contract is perfect. And the Torellis? Anthony Torelli died in federal prison 5 years ago. His son Michael runs a restaurant in Phoenix now, claims he's legitimate. The FBI hasn't connected him to anything illegal in a decade. That world has mostly moved on. You're probably safe, though I'd still recommend keeping a low profile when you claim the shares. I returned to teaching the next day. My students didn't notice anything different about Mr. Holbrook, who explained covalent bonds and balanced equations like the world hadn't shifted on its axis. Sterling continued sending his gloating messages, pictures from board meetings where he sat in Dad's chair, photos of him changing the office decor, updates about firing Dad's old secretary because he wanted to build his own team. I responded to every message the same way. "Congrats." "Good for you." "Sounds great." 2 weeks later, I visited my mother in Florida. She was sitting by the pool when I arrived, reading a book about orchids. Philip was in the kitchen, visible through the sliding doors, watching us without trying to look like he was watching. "You went to the bank," she said, not a question. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're a terrible liar, Dexter. You got that from Vincent. He couldn't lie either, which is why the FBI loved him as a witness. If you'd known the truth, it would have shown on your face every time someone mentioned your father. And that could have killed you. You loved him, Vincent. More than I've ever loved anyone, including you, and I love you with everything I have. But Vincent was the kind of love that breaks the universe a little, makes everything else seem dim by comparison. 14 months, that's all we got. And Raymond saved us. He gave you a name, a life, a chance to grow up without looking over your shoulder. I couldn't love him the way I loved Vincent, but I respected him. He knew that was enough. That briefcase sits in my apartment now, fully restored. I had the locks repaired, the leather conditioned, the brass polished. Inside, I keep photos of 2 fathers. Vincent Corvino, who gave me life and died trying to do the right thing, and Raymond Holbrook, who gave me his name and lived a lie to keep me safe. In 18 months, when I turn 40, I'll walk into a boardroom with documents that will shatter Sterling's perfect world. He'll rage, threaten, probably try to buy me out. But I won't sell. Not for any price. Because this isn't about money. It's about a father who loved me enough to let me hate him. It's about a biological father who chose justice over safety. It's about learning that sometimes the smallest inheritance carries the greatest weight. My students often ask why I still teach when my family owns hotels. Because, I tell them, chemistry teaches us that the most powerful reactions happen when you combine elements that don't seem to belong together. Like a mobster's son raised by his partner, like a fortune hidden in a worthless briefcase, like a father's cruelty that was actually love. The truth is, Sterling inherited the empire everyone could see, but I inherited the truth. And in 18 months, the truth is going to walk through his boardroom door, sit down at his conference table, and remind him that in chemistry and in life, the most important elements are often the ones you never saw coming. Some sons are born, others are chosen. And sometimes, the briefcase that looks like junk contains everything that matters. The Torellis might have killed Vincent Corvino. Sterling might own 70% of Holbrook Hospitality. But I'm still here, teaching chemistry in a public high school, waiting for my 40th birthday, like a chemical reaction, waiting for the right catalyst. And when that day comes, when I finally claim Vincent Corvino's legacy, I'll remember the lesson both my fathers taught me. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the richest or the most visible. Sometimes survival is about being invisible until the moment you don't have to be anymore. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who appreciates a good twist. Your support helps us bring more of these compelling narratives to life. Drop a comment below sharing what you think Dexter should do when he claims his inheritance. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us that sometimes the smallest gifts carry the biggest surprises. Thank you for watching, and remember, not everything valuable looks valuable at first glance.